What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Kilo Loco, and today we're going to be working with Flutter. So we're coming in at day 22 of hashtag 30 days of Flutter, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to build out the entire authentication flow. We're going to be dealing with navigation and making it so that our app can switch between the different authentication screens, as well as switch between the authentication state and the session state. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right on in. So as you can see, we're just picking up from where we left off last time. We built out the entire login view. I showed you how to go over forms, all that jazz. And if you want to check that video out, up there, right? So now that we have the login view all set up, let's go ahead and take a look at it. And as you can see right here, there's nothing too crazy going on. We just got those two different fields and the button, and that's just the entirety of our login form, right? Now, since we are going to be building out the entire authentication flow in this tutorial, one thing that we are missing from this type of screen is to have a button at the bottom. So, if you don't have an account, you need to have the ability to sign up. So let's add that button now, right here at the bottom. So now the modification that I made right here is I wrapped our login form in a stack so that we can have this show sign up button visible. And that show sign up button is just this function, which is going to have a text button saying don't have an account, sign up. And then we don't have any functionality for it yet. We're going to build that out a little bit later. And if we take a look at it, we can see that, well, right now it's all the way at the top. We don't want that. What we actually need to do is go back up to the stack. We need to move the stack's alignment so that it looks nice, right? So we need to update the alignment of the stack. All right, so now it's alignment bottom center. We take a look at it, looking much better. So now whenever we tap this button, it's going to actually switch us over to the sign up view. Now there's going to be two additional views, well, like a couple of additional views, but the two additional auth views that we need to build out. And they're essentially going to look extremely close to what we have right here. So we're going to need to build out the sign up view, which is going to look exactly like this view right here, except it's going to have an email field. And then we need to also add in a confirmation view. So we're going to be able to confirm the user's email by the code that they put in. And that's just going to be a single field with a button, and everything else is going to look pretty much the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed through that, and I'm actually going to essentially copy everything that we have in our login folder and duplicate that twice, one for the sign up view and one for the login view. And it's going to include like the blocks, the events, the states, and things like that, but for those specific views. So I'm going to do that now, and then I'll go back and review everything that I copied. So as you can see, I created all kinds of copies up here. You can see right above my head. So let's start off with the confirm folder. So you can see that we have a confirmation block, a confirmation event, state, and view, right? So the block is obviously going to be working with the event. So there's only going to be two different types of events. The code can change, or the confirmation code was submitted, right? And then the confirmation state. So we're only going to be, once again, working with one field. So we're just going to be tracking that code, and then we're just going to make sure that it's going to be 6 digits in length, and then everything else is pretty much the same as login. For the actual confirmation block, you can see that we are going to be working, once again, confirmation event, confirmation state. We're also taking in that auth repo right here, and we're doing pretty much everything the same. So like confirmation code changed, the form was submitted, and right now I still have the auth repo set to login because we don't have anything there updated quite yet. I'm going to do that right now, but I just wanted to go back and show you everything that was copied so far, and then the confirmation view. So this is, once again, very similar to the login view. So we have our column. It's going to just be the field and the button. Updated the names for the code field and the confirm button, and this one will not have thing to switch between like sign up and login, right? So that's something that it's not going to have. Now the sign up is like pretty much everything that I addressed, but with an additional field, right? So the sign up event is going to have the username change, the email change. That's the important one that was switched, and then the password change, and then we still have the submitted. State, all the same stuff, except we added email to everything that the login already has. Block, pretty much the same thing, right? The sign up event, sign up state, And then right here we are tracking the email, and then we're still doing login right here. We're about to fix that right now. And then the view, pretty much everything the same. You can see that we even have the imports still at the same spot. Pretty much everything the same. We still have that sign up form, but this time we do have that button that's going to allow us to show the login. We have the 3 fields plus the button in our column, and this is our email field right here, right? And then down here, the show login button. Already have an account? If so, then sign in. So those are all the copies and changes that we've made so far, with the sign up and the confirmation just being almost exactly like the login. What we do need to do is go back and update our auth repository, right? Because now there's a couple of different functions that we need to incorporate. So we need to incorporate sign up, and we need to incorporate the confirmation. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to add those functions into our auth repository, but we're also going to update the methods, because we're going to be expecting to get back like a user ID, right? So when we log in, we should get a user ID. When we sign up, we won't get a user ID, but when we do the confirmation, we should get that user ID, right? So let's go ahead and add in those functions now. So our auth repository is now updated to handle the different functions that we're going to need, right? We have the login, which has been updated to return a future string. And then also we want to make sure that we're passing in the required arguments to actually log in. So we're not going to implement the functionality, but we're just getting everything all set up so that we can pass in the arguments as expected, and we can see where we need to hang on to state for some of these. So we're going to need the username and password to log in, right? And then for sign up, we're going to need username, email, and password. So all of those are required. And then this one is going to return a future void. So we're going to wait, but we're not going to actually be able to get the ID at this point until we've actually confirmed that user, which is this confirm sign up. And this will return the user ID. So we'll confirm the user sign up. We'll get that username and we'll confirm with the username and the confirmation code, and then we'll be returning back some type of user ID like we see right here. So the only thing that we are kind of missing at this point is probably sign out. So you're able to sign up and sign in, but we also need to add sign out. So let's add that as well. All right, so there we go. We also have sign out. So that's also going to be an asynchronous function, and we'll just say that it takes 2 seconds to complete, right? So that's pretty much all we need to do to update for our auth repository for right now. Let's go back over to the different blocks that we have, right? And right here we can see, luckily it's bringing them up in yellow, so we know exactly where we need to change. So right here, we're going to need to enter in for login. We're going to need to enter in the username and the password. So let's go ahead and put in some empty strings for right now and get our project up and working again, and then we'll come back over here. So we need the username and the password. Then we also need to update the login block. And actually this was supposed to be over here. So we'll copy this bad boy right here. We're going to copy them. We're going to paste it right here. And then for the sign up, though, go back to the sign up block. We're going to change this to sign up, right? We're going to include the email as an empty string. And then also on confirmation block, we need to do the same thing for the confirm. All right, so now we have the confirm sign up being called from the confirmation block. Now let's head back over to our login block for a second. Now, the way that we're going to be passing in the username and password is going to be directly from our state, because remember that the login state that we're working with has the username and password. So we're able to just pull that directly from the state that's provided to us, since we're extending a block object. So we can just say state.username, and then we can do the same thing for the password, state.password, right? So that's really nice and clean. If you ask me, we can do the same exact thing for the sign up block too, right? So now when we do the username, we're gonna grab it from the state.username. State for this one, since it's a sign up state, has an email as well. So we'll do state.email and then state.password, right? So all very straightforward. Let's do password like this. Nothing too crazy going on there. The problem that we run into is when we get over to our confirmation block. So for the confirmation block, our state, if we take a look at it, where is it? Confirmation state. If we take a look at it, we have the code, right, which is needed to confirm the sign up. The problem is that we don't have the username that's required to confirm, right? So if we go to our confirmation block and we take a look at it, we're expecting to pass in a username and the confirmation code. So we can fix this problem right here with the confirmation code and just pass in the code, but we don't have the username. So this is where we're going to have another, a cubit. We're going to have a cubit that's going to keep track of the state of the entire auth flow. So let's go ahead and create a new cubit called auth cubit. So we now have an auth cubit, and as you can see, it extends cubit and it's going to take in a type called auth state, which we haven't created yet. Now the auth cubit is going to be responsible for two different things. It's going to be responsible for the navigation of the auth flow. So essentially switching from login to sign up and from sign up to confirm, right? But it's also going to be responsible for hanging on to the credentials. So when a user logs in, they have their username and password, right? And we want to be able to hang on to that username and the user's ID as well once we do get that login through our auth flow, and we want to be able to pass that further along. Same thing for our sign up. We want to be able to hang on to all the information that the user signs up with. That's going to include their username, their email, their password, so that we're able to not only sign up and confirm, but we're able to get back the username when we need to confirm, as well as automatically log in after we're done signing up, so we don't have to drop the user back on the login screen. So that's going to make a little bit more sense once we get to that point. But at this point, let's go ahead and create the auth state. So we have the auth state, and it's only going to have three different states to choose from. So we're going to start off with the login, right? Whenever you open up a brand new app, it usually drops you on the login page, and then you can choose if you want to sign up. And then if you do sign up, then you're going to have to confirm your sign up. Now we also need to add a couple of functions that are going to be able to emit these different states so that we can switch between these different screens. So let's add those. So we're going to have the function show login, emit the login, sign up is going to emit sign up, and the show confirm sign up is actually going to take in a couple of parameters, the username, email, and password, so that we can hang on to those properties in our auth qubit. And then we're gonna hang on to those right now, but let's also emit the confirm sign up state, obviously, right? So now what I want to do is I want to create an object that's going to hang on to the username, email, and password. So let's go ahead and create an object called auth credentials. So here we have our auth credentials. It's going to take in a username, an email, a password, and a user ID. Now the username is absolutely necessary because that's what they're going to be using in order to, sign in, like log in or sign up. So that's something that we're always guaranteed to have. And that's why I'm marking this with required. Now, depending on whether they're logging in or signing up will determine whether we have their email or not. Password could be mandatory, but it's mostly the only time that we actually need the password is if we're signing up, and that's why I'm leaving it as like an optional parameter. And then the user ID. Now the user ID you'll only have at the login stage and once you're confirming your sign up. So that's why it's also a variable, as you can see right here. So now we have our auth credentials right here. Let's go back over to our confirmation block, or not our confirmation block, but our auth qubit, and let's hang on to each of these properties as an auth credential. And there we go. So now we have an instance of the credentials, which we are going to create right here when we do the show confirm sign up. So we'll be able to hang on to the username, email, and password that were passed in by the user when they're on that sign up page. And we'll be able to access them later on down the road. Now, as you can see, we have access to those credentials in the auth qubit. So what we're going to do is back over here in our confirmation block is at the top, we're going to make sure that that auth qubit is also a property that needs to be passed into the confirmation block when it's being created. So let's add that now. So what this does is it makes it so that we have access to the auth qubit inside of our confirmation block. And now when we want to confirm sign up and we want to hit the auth repo and pass the username in, we can access that from the auth qubit's credentials and pass in the username like so. So this is how we're gonna handle essentially dependency injection, is by hanging on to state in our qubit. So now that we have our auth qubit able to manage and manipulate the state for what screen is supposed to be shown, let's go ahead and create an auth navigator, which is going to be responsible for moving us between those screens. So our auth navigator is going to need to be able to observe the auth qubit. So we're going to have it as a block builder up at the top, and the child of that block builder is going to be the navigator. We'll then be able to switch between the different screens that we've created, which are the login, the sign up, and the confirm sign up. So let's add in all that logic now. So as you can see here, we have the block builder, which is going to take in the auth qubit and the auth state. We'll pass that state down into our navigator, and we'll check if it's equal to auth state.login, which means that we need to show the login view. Now, what we also want to do is show the sign up and confirm sign up views as well, right? But what we want to make sure happens is that we're not just going to immediately flip between the views. It's okay to flip between login and sign up. We don't need that push animation, but when we're doing the confirm sign up, we do want that push animation because we're going from sign up and then we're going to go to the next view, which is relevant to that flow, which is confirm sign up. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the spread operator so that we can add another list inside of our navigator pages list. And there we go. So I marked these out just because it was getting a little bit too cluttered, a little bit. So now you can see that we have this if statement, which is going to check for either or, right? Which means that this logic right here is going to always be firing if it's going to be either of these states. So that's mainly so that we can allow for that push animation, and we can do another if statement inside of our if statement, right? So we're always going to be showing the sign up view if it's one of these two states. But what's important here is that we're going to essentially be pushing the confirmation view on top of the sign up view if it is confirm sign up. So with that done, let's go ahead and give it a test, and we can start showing our auth navigator, and we also need to start providing the auth qubit. So let's go back over to our main.dart, if I could find it. And let's replace this with a new block provider, which is going to provide our auth qubit, right? And then we're also going to be using the child as the auth navigator. So I replaced the login view with this block provider. We're going to provide the auth qubit because, you know, obvious reasons. And then the auth navigator is going to be the child, so it's going to be responsible for showing the view. If everything works as expected, then we should see that the auth navigator is presenting the login view because that's its initial state, right? So our auth qubit has an initial state of auth state.login. So let's open up that simulator and boom, we see that login. Now let's see if we can get the buttons working, right? Because right now when you tap on it, nothing happens. So we need to update the functionality for both of these views, let's start with the login view, and we'll go down over to our show signup button. And now we need to access our auth qubit to show the signup. And as we can see here, we are now updating our show signup button to take in the context so that we can read our context, grab the auth qubit, and show signup. So let's go ahead and show our simulator and see if this button works now. And as you can see, it does. Now we just need to do the same thing for the signup view. So let's head over to signup view. We're going to update it to take in a context and do pretty much the inverse. And there we go. So our show login button now takes in a context, and we access the context, read it, and we hit show login. Let's bring up the simulator, and bam, we go back and forth all day, baby. Oh yes. So next, what we need to do is we need to also implement the sign up button. Now we need to obviously go through and add in some values, but once we do hit that, we want to make sure that everything works. So as you can see, we have valid information everywhere. We do sign up, we wait our 3 seconds, and then we want to see what happens. So right now, nothing happens, and that's because we're not updating the auth qubit to show the confirm signup page. So now we need to head over to our signup block, and down here when we submit the form, we are going to emit the success still, right? But we want to take advantage of the auth qubit, and we need to pass that in right here to our signup block. Now that we have our auth qubit being passed in, we should be able to access it right here when we do get the success. And now what we want to do is we want to update the auth qubit to show the sign up, and we're going to need to pass in all the information that was passed or that is currently inside of our sign up state. So now that we have the show confirm sign up being called and we're passing in all the relevant values, we're going to have our auth qubit hang on to those values inside the credentials, and then it's finally going to confirm, it's going to emit that confirmed signup, which will show the confirmed signup view. So let's show this in action. All right, so we have valid information right here. We do sign up. It's going to take 3 seconds. Then it should automatically push, but it looks like it didn't. So what we need to do is let's give it a restart and see if that's the problem. And if not, then I might have missed a step. Oh, so while it's building, I think I know where I missed the step. The fact that we don't actually pass in the auth qubit to our signup qubit. So if we look at our signup block, right, we just added the auth qubit to be a field that needs to be passed in, but we're actually not doing that. So back over in our signup view, we want to make sure that we're passing our auth qubit right here as a parameter in our signup block when we add it to the block provider. All right, so that was the line of code that we were missing. Let me go back and make sure that we add this to the other blocks as well, because we're going to need it. So we're going to need it in the confirmation block. So we'll scroll all the way up and go to, or we need to go to the view. We're going to need it here. So let's go ahead and add it here. And then we're also going to need it in the login block as well. So we'll login view, and then we'll go to the login block. So we'll go to login view all the way at the top where we're creating it like that. And now we just need to update the parameters of each of those blocks. All right, so now you can see that we're adding the auth qubit to the confirmation block inside of the confirmation view. We're doing the same thing to the login block. We're adding the auth qubit inside of the login view, and the signup view has the signup block, and we're adding in that auth qubit right there. So let's go ahead and save it and refresh, and we'll open up our simulator like so. So then we do sign up, we enter in some information like username. This only needs to have like the @ and then the password like that, and we'll do sign up. And remember that this is all based off of our validation, but you can see that the confirmation code screen, or the confirmation or confirm view, is now showing, and that's looking good. And then if we try to do confirm ahead of time, it's going to say invalid code. We do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 like that, and we should get a success, but nothing is going to happen because at this point we should be attempting to log in. So in order for us to log in and show the session, what we're going to do is we're going to have a different separate navigator, which is responsible for our app. So let's go ahead and create a new file, and this is actually going to be outside of the auth folder because now we're kind of working with sessions and stuff like that. And this is more along the lines of something that's related to the entirety of the app and not just the auth portion. So let's go ahead and create a new file called app navigator. So our app navigator is going to be what's responsible for showing us either the authentication flow or the session flow, because those flows are going to go very deep depending on which flow you're in, right? So auth has like the login, the sign up, the confirm sign up. There might be like multi-factor authentication, forget password, things like that. Whereas the session is going to have like, maybe it's a tab bar and you have all kinds of different features, and this is going to be the main portion of your app, right? So that's why I'm going to have a completely separate navigator to manage those two different flows. Now the navigator needs to be able to change based off of different states. So what we need to do is create an app state or a session state that will represent whether we're authenticated or unauthenticated, or maybe we're in the process of figuring that out. So let's go ahead and create a new file called session state. So like I said, we're going to have 3 different states. Either we don't know what the current auth state is, so that's unknown, unauthenticated, which the user needs to sign in, or authenticated, in which case the user has signed in successfully, but we also want to maintain access to that user object. Now we don't have a user object in here right now, so I'm going to represent a user object with a dynamic, and then we'll go back and replace that in a different video. So there we go. We have our 3 different states, and as you can see, the authenticated state is going to hang on to our user. So now let's head back over to the app navigator, and let's go ahead and create a couple of different flows to represent these views. Now we don't have a session view, and we don't have like a loading view to represent that unknown state. So I'll just go ahead and real quick, I'll create those 2 files as well, and then we can add in the different functionality and views that are represented with each of those states. So now we have our session view, which is just going to be a text in the center of the screen that says session view. And then we also have the loading view, which is just going to be pretty much the same thing, except it's going to be a circular progress indicator. So now over here at our app navigator, we'll be able to represent we'll be able to put in views that represent each of those different states. So let's add that now. Oh, actually, we won't even be able to do that quite yet because we don't have a session cubit to represent those different states. So let's add that first before we start working with the navigator. So we'll go ahead and add it in our lib. It'll be a new file, and we're going to call it session cubit. So our session cubit is obviously going to extend cubit, and it's going to take in a session state, and we're going to start off with the unknown session state. So from here, we need to be able to emit the 2 other states that we can have once we've passed this unknown session state, right? So we can either emit the authentication state, which is saying that the user needs to sign up or sign in or something like that, or they're in the session state where they have been authenticated, and we want to be able to actually get the user object for that authenticated user. So let's go ahead and add in a couple of those functions now. So as you can see here, the show auth is simply going to emit the unauthenticated. The show session is going to take in some auth credentials. So once again, at this point, we should be able to receive the username and the user ID, right? And it's important that we have all the credentials, because if we're signing up, we want to be able to pass those credentials onto the user object, which is going to live in our database. So that's why we're passing over the entire credentials. So at this point, we don't have a database connected to the app. We'll be covering something like that in the next video. But what we want to do is we want to create a user object and then pass that, or create or query that user object and pass that user object right here. But in the meantime, what we'll do is we'll just simply pass in the username. So as you can see here, I'm just accessing the credentials username and making that the user, because it's taking in a dynamic right now and it doesn't really matter. But I also left this comment right here just to show you the idea of what's going to happen in the future. We're going to have some type of data repository, and we should be able to get a user from that data repository, and we'll just get that by the user ID that's passed from the credentials. And then that's when we'll pass in the real user right here. But we won't be doing that in this video. So now that we have that, we're able to sign in, but we also need to be able to sign out and get back to that unauthenticated state. So let's also add in the sign out function. So sign out requires that we have access to the auth repository, so we can call auth repo.signout. And then also, we don't necessarily want to wait until the auth or until the sign out is completed. We just simply want to take the user back into the sign up or the login screen, right? So we're actually not even going to make this an asynchronous function, because we don't care how long it takes for the backend to sign out. We just want to immediately show the login view. So let's add in those changes. And there we go. We update our constructor to take in the auth repo, and then we call auth repo.signout in the signout function, and then we also emit the unauthenticated state. So we're okay with that for right now. Now that we have a qubit that represents the different sessions and the session states, we can head back over to the app navigator, and this is when we can add our block builder to switch on the different pages that should be shown by our navigator. And there we go. So now our app navigator is returning a block builder, which is going to work with our session qubit, our session state, pass that state in our navigator for the pages. We'll check the state. If it's unknown, show the loading view. If it's unauthenticated, we'll show the auth flow. And what we want to do is we want to have a block provider so that we're creating our auth qubit. Right now we're doing that in main.dart, but we need to remove that because now we're going to be showing our block or our app navigator, and we need to actually provide the session qubit instead, right? So we need to have our material page be the block provider, which is going to have the auth navigator. And then if we are authenticated, then we'll simply show the session view. So like I said, we need to go back over to our main.dart, and we need to replace this, this block provider and change it from providing the auth qubit to providing the session qubit, as well as making the child the app navigator. And it's a pretty simple change. So as you can see, we now have the session qubit being provided. We're opening up that app navigator. The session qubit should start off with the unknown, and that will give us the loading page. Then depending on what the state is, what state is emitted after that will determine whether we show the unauthenticated flow or the session flow. So another thing that we're also missing is the fact that we're never actually launching our session view. So in our auth qubit, what we need to do is we need to have the ability to launch the the session flow from the auth qubit. So let's add in a new function here. So now we have this launch session, and it's going to take in the credentials, because remember, if we are going to essentially say that this user is authenticated, we need those credentials in order to create that authenticated state. We also need to have access to the session qubit inside of our auth qubit. So let's go ahead and add that into the constructor as well. All right, so now we have an instance of our session qubit inside of our auth qubit, and our session qubit qubit gives us the ability to show the session as long as we can provide those credentials. So that is where our launch session comes in. So let's go back over to the auth qubit, and we can go down and we can just simply do session qubit.show session, and then we pass in those credentials like so. There we go. So this is going to allow us to launch the auth session. Now we just need to launch that auth session in the relevant positions, right? Because we're still not calling this function anywhere. So the relevant positions where we're actually going to need and have those credentials are going to be, first of all, it's going to be in the login block, right? So we need to be able to launch the auth session after we have officially logged in and we get that success. And then we need to do the same thing over in the confirm signup. So let's start here. So now we have the auth qubit launching the session from inside of our login block, and we are going to have the auth credentials pass in the state's username property, right? The only thing that we're missing is the actual user ID on our auth credentials, because remember that it's only after we log in that we'll have that. So our login function on our auth repo returns a future string. So once we await for that, we just want to pass that into these auth credentials that we're creating right here. And there we go. So now the credentials will have the username and the user ID. And the user ID is the most important part of the login part of passing the auth credentials, because we need to look up the user by that ID. Now we need to do the same exact thing in our confirmation block. So let's head back over here, and we already have the auth qubit available to us. So now we just need to create, we need to access the user ID, which is coming from the confirm signup, and then we need to create new credentials essentially. So let's do that too. So as you can see here, we're going to access our credentials from our auth qubit, and then we're going to update these credentials, the user ID for those credentials, and then we'll pass it back into the auth qubit's launch session method, which will trigger the entire authentication, or the entire launch flow to go out, get the user, and then essentially get it or create it in our database, and we'll be able to go and have our user actually take advantage of all the cool app features from there. All right, and here we go. We got this loading view. So that means that we aren't actually changing the session state, but it does look like we didn't get any crashes. So that's kind of good. So if we head back over to our session qubit, you can see that we're in this unknown state, but we never actually attempt to either show auth or show session anywhere. And the way that we're actually going to handle this is we're going to attempt to automatically log in. So we're going to need to make some changes to our auth repo to be able to try and do that. And then we're also going to need to attempt to auto login whenever we create this session qubit, which should only be once. So let's start off with our auth repository and create a new function. We can do it up here at the top. That should be fun. That is going to be attempt auto sign in, and that should also give us back our user ID. But if not, then we'll simply say that they're unauthenticated. All right, so we have this attempt auto login function that is going to return a future string, and it's going to be asynchronous. So we're going to wait for 1 second just to simulate that. And then after that, we'll throw an exception just so that we can see the not signed in part, and we can mess around with the auth flow, right? And then let's go back over to our session qubit. And now we can take advantage of that by creating a function in here called attempt auto sign in as well. So as you can see here, our attempt auto login inside of the session qubit is also, well, it's also going to be an async function, right? But we're going to try to get back the user ID from the attempt auto login. We know that we are throwing in an exception right there at this moment. So the emit is going to be unauthenticated. But assuming that we change that and we're going to get back a user ID, what we're really going to be doing in the next video is going to be getting a user by accessing like a data repo, and we'll be able to get the user by the ID, kind of like how we did down here, right? And then we'll pass in the authenticated. But since we're just testing stuff out, we'll just simply make the user ID for right here. So now if we go back, we stop it, and then we start the app again. Well, actually this won't work just yet. What we actually need to do is we need to make sure that we're attempting to auto login right when we create this object. So attempt auto login right there. I save it, and it should be able to catch that change when we start the app. So we see it, it's being pulled up. We should see a second of the loading, and then it should go to auto login. Maybe it didn't catch it. Let's try to do a restart. All right, so here we go. A fresh restart, and we are creating the session qubit, and we do get an error, which is right here. So tried calling attempt auto login and the receiver was null. So I think that's because we actually are not passing in the auth repository to our session qubit, and we want to make sure that we are doing that. So let's go back over to our app navigator, or actually main.dart, and right here in our session qubit, we need to make sure that we have our auth repo being passed in, and we can do that from our context by doing context.read, and we'll specify that we're looking for the auth repository like that. Let's do another restart, and we should be good to go. And there we go. All right, let's do one more start from scratch just so that we can see this in all of its glory. Oh yes, all of the glory. And here we go, and we get a second of progress indicator, right? A second. Ooh, okay. We can flip between the two, right? Oh yes. All right, let's attempt to sign in. So we enter in a username. Email only requires that you have the @ symbol, so that will work. We do password as well. We do sign up, and we wait like 3 seconds, then we should see confirmation code. Very good. Now, if we enter in anything that's shorter than 6, or that's not equal to 6, we should get a verification failure, right? We do 6. Now we should hit the success. Inside of our confirmation block, we should also be launching the session. So we should be able to sign in after this. So, oh, we hit a crash. Oh, that's not good. So let's go ahead and take a look at this error. All right, so I was able to figure it out. So what's going on here is that we actually aren't able to call a show session because we actually never added the session qubit to the auth qubit. So if we go back over to our auth qubit, you can see that we're expecting to have a session qubit right here, which is giving us the ability to do that show session. But over in our app navigator, you can see that we are actually never providing that to the auth qubit. So let's go ahead and update that. All right, and there we go. So it's a simple little change. Our auth qubit now has the session qubit from our context like so, and we are going to stop. We're going to start it up again, and when it launches, we should be able to go through the entire flow, assuming that, you know, everything else is working. All right, here we go. We're at the login screen. We're going to go to the sign up screen. We're going to enter in a username like so, a email like so. So we can just put in anything, and then a password, which is just going to be, you know, password. So password, and then we wait 3 seconds. It says that we are able to go to the confirmation screen. We enter in 6 digits. We do confirm. It should launch our session. Let's see. And now we have the session view. Now what we want to do is we want to update our session view to also contain a logout button. All right, so here we go. Now we are essentially utilizing the sign out method. And if we go back over to our app, I don't know if it stayed there, but like if we go back over to our app, oh, we couldn't see it. So let's go ahead and update the main axis alignment to be center, like so. And now what we want to do is we want to hit that sign out button, and we sign out, and we're back to the username or to the login screen. So looking pretty good. Now let's go ahead and enter in anything, you know, whatever, and a password for whatever, and we log in. And let's see if it will go to the session, and there we go. So that's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to show you in this video. I know it was a longer one, but there was a lot to do. We had to build out the entire auth flow. We had to add in 2 different screens. We had to manipulate state for the auth flow and for the app itself, switching between, you know, the session flow and the auth flow, and then working with multiple cubits and blocks and things like that. So I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that you found it very informative. If you want to see more videos like this, then make sure that you subscribe to the channel, and I have much more Flutter to go. So we're going to continue building out our social media app in the upcoming days to finish up this challenge of hashtag 30 days of Flutter. And if you want to be part of that, make sure that you keep watching. So that's it for today. Thank you for your time. Go out there and keep coding passionately.